I'm really thrilled to introduce our next speaker, Grady Kerr. Thank you, Grady, so much for being on today.
I'm super happy to be here.
Thank you, Grady, for being here. We're excited for our audience to hear more about how you are able to incorporate stories into your family. And I think it's very fascinating because in your line of work, not only are you a speaker and a podcaster, but in your work, you also train people about software, which I think is probably not the most interesting topic, right?
It can be very boring.
Right. I would imagine. So you're a trainer for different software companies for small businesses. And so you said that the way you engage people is through engaging stories. So they don't probably fall asleep on you while you're training. So I'm interested to see how you're able to use that skill that you have for work in your home life. And so Grady is also a husband and a father to five cute little kids. He lives out in Arizona. And what I love about what he does is that he's able to not only tell stories at work, at home, he's really great on social media. And he is a storyteller on social media and shares his life and ways that he can connect with other people. And so with that being said, Grady, why don't we jump into your title, which is Passing on Stories over Ice Cream. Okay, you got me with you got me with ice cream. Who doesn't love dessert? So how about we start right there?
Yeah, ice cream is it's like the great balancer. Everyone can say see ice cream and go, okay, we already have something in common right now. What else? And really, this all just kind of came from this idea that it's really hard to feel connected to our family that's passed on. We don't see them anymore. Like especially me, I'm an introvert. Like I was actually Facebook messaging in front. Yes, I
I
am
don't
the
believe it.
I am the extroverted introvert. I do very well in one-to-one communications, but if we were strangers, I would not go talk to you at all. Mm-mm.
I don't
And
know.
so with this idea here, these people that have passed on, we don't see them anymore. It's out of sight, out of mind for a lot of us.
Mhm.
And think about then our kids. At least I have some memories of like my grandparents. Most of my kids haven't even met them, and so what we wanted to make sure that we could do is have like this storytelling mechanism that say, okay, when this happens, it's story time, and everyone is excited about it, as well as just the importance of story. Tom Corson Knowles, he writes for TCK Publishing, and he just talked about how the human brain is hardwired to communicate through stories. It's through stories that we understand aspects of our life, including social norms. It's how we learn like the difference between right and wrong. Is through watching other people's lived experiences. I mean, movies are great stories just in film. And so I like to think about the first five books of the Old Testament, the first five books of Moses that we call them. And so Malia, you're here in front of me. I want you to think about something, anything from one of the first five books of Moses. Now, for those of you who are wondering what those even are, it's Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy.
Right.
Think of something. What is it?
The party in the Red Sea. That's first.
Yes, perfect. Almost every single situation that comes up is either from the book of Genesis or from kind of the beginning of Exodus. Red Sea is like the dividing line. I think that we're still in Genesis at that point. Maybe we're over in Exodus at that point, but it's like that. Once the Israelites like leave and Moses gets the 10 Commandments, the rest becomes a blur for many of us. Because especially like Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, it becomes very much the law. These are how many doves to sacrifice. This is what you do in the situation. Like it's just law, law, law. It's not engaging. It's not memorable. So how do you get your kids and other people to learn what's right and what's wrong without saying, do this, do this, do this, don't do that, don't do that, do that. And so for us, it was about trying to get these memories preserved with our kids. I love the movie Coco. Spoilers for Coco. If you haven't seen it yet, just hit that 15-second forward button twice. But at the end, we learned that one of the most important things for these spirits in Coco to be preserved is the memory, people remembering who they are. And, there's some not quite, I don't think, real parts of that, but thematically, I love it because it's that idea of feeling connected back to this earth experience for those spirits that have passed on. It's when people here remember them. And so once those stories are forgotten, they're gone. Like there's no one else to tell those stories. And so it's important for us to preserve those stories because it helps our kids feel connected to other people besides mom and dad.
Right. I love that. Coco is a great one in our home. And I love what you said about we need to write it down. If we don't share, and then that becomes a loss in history. It's like we never existed, and that's kind of a sad concept. And so I
Yeah,
love
and
how you're able to tell the stories to connect with your kids. You talked about um, stories are memorable, and at the very beginning when you talked about, well, just what you just said about the Bible, and it's interesting. I never thought about that before, but those stories, when you ask that question, there was that, and the Ten Commandments or whatnot, but it was the stories we remembered. It wasn't even so much the principles or the
yeah, and the stories usually teach the principles, because
right.
then we see, like, you think about the 10 plagues where, Pharaoh, before they got to cross that Red Sea, the plagues got like just worse and worse and worse and worse. And people are like, man, dumb Pharaoh, you should have let him go the first time. But Pharaoh had to go through all these hard times before he finally, softened his heart and then immediately hardened it again. And so the same thing with us, like, okay, when do we harden our hearts? When are the times for us where we have to slow down a little bit? And so for me, like, that's the idea. Like, the story reinforces the principle.
Right. So, how did you start in your storytelling within your own home? And did it have any influence upon what home you were raised in?
Yeah, I've always loved stories. I just do. Like, I love movies. I actually took a couple classes in films on film studies. I think about actually my dad. So my dad is kind of like me. He's an introvert. We call ourselves sometimes the extroverted introvert, meaning we can hang out with people. We're not weird and awkward, but we don't want to. Like given a choice between staying home on Friday night or going and meet a bunch of strangers at a party, I might just want to stay home. My dad's the same way. He doesn't go out and meet new people, but the people he knows are super close. And one of the my favorite things to watch my dad do is tell stories. He loves telling funny stories. And I just like, especially as a kid, I never got that from him. My dad didn't tell me stories. He told all his friends stories. And I'm like, I get to know my dad better listening to him tell stories about himself and even other people. And so one of the things we just realized is that big essential piece. And so when my grandpa Jack, it's my mom's father, he was kind of nearing the end of his life. He was in a hospice home. He had dementia, and the mind was just going. And I've been married to my wife Christy for a few years at that point. And we had our first son, Garen. He was maybe 6 months, maybe a year, very young. And we went out and we visited my grandfather that day. We spent a couple hours with him. It was always a funny thing because he took my son's book and like wouldn't give it back. And we're like, no, you have to give it back now, Grandpa. My son's kind of like, my book. And so it was just a fun experience. And my son was so young, like he doesn't remember any of it. But we remember that experience. And the real thing that stuck to me though was when my mom went to go visit him a week later. My mom was tidying up his things and she found a book. And inside the book was a little sliver of paper, like, you use like a sheet of paper for a bookmark. And on that bookmark, as she opened it up, was two names. It was my name, Grady, and my son name's Garen. And she realizes that to my grandpa, that was important. He wanted to remember going through dementia, you're starting to lose all of your sense of self. But that was something that he wanted to hold on to. He wanted to remember us when he knew he was starting to forget. And it just kind of was a moment for me where I realized he's not going to be around for much longer. And I feel like I owe it to him to not forget him, especially my children who never even met him. I owe it to him to make sure that they don't forget who he is. And so for us, we tried to think about how to make that happen. And my wife, Christy, who's just super smart and amazing,
Yep.
she was like, you know what we need to do? We just need to have on their birthday, we will eat their favorite dessert and we will just tell stories about them, what their lives, what we remember about them, what we've learned from them, from other people. And it's just become a really fun experience for the family.
That's awesome. So, how do you implement that? How do you remember, for one, in your busy life with 5 kids and working and your website and all the things you do? How do you even remember to do that? Because I know I've had that intention to do, and the execution has been very lacking. So, how do we move from good intention to like execution and keeping it simple?
Christy gets all the credit for this one. She runs it. She makes sure it happens. I make sure it's fun. It's kind of the equation, that we're equally yoked in all of those ways. But for her, it's just, she's got it all in a book where she's got everyone's birthday, because it's not just the grandparents' birthdays in this book. And so what she does is she takes this book that she has probably a journal. I don't know. And you brought this up earlier. I'm not a writer. I don't do a very good job of documenting stories. I remember them, and I hope I tell them in a way that my kids remember them, because they won't find it written down anywhere. Maybe on my blog somewhere. That's where I usually write things down, is on my blog. But she writes them down in this book, and she's got my parents' addresses, our families, not addresses, sorry, birthdays, our family's birthdays. She's got my grandparents' birthdays. She's got my siblings' birthdays, all of my nieces and nephews' birthdays. Sometimes she even tells my parents when they are, so they make sure they get stuff. Like she is on top of it. She loves holidays. And so then each month she's got this big, huge like office calendar, and she writes for the month all of the birthdays for everybody on that thing. So she has them. I think she does it for the year probably. They're all there. And so she's planning dinner. She's like, okay, that night's going to be a special night. In fact, this weekend is my grandma Mary Lee's birthday, and we've got dessert all planned. I'm super excited, but I didn't remember she did. She gets the credit for that one. But yeah, it's just one of those things that just so it's like we try to have dessert anyways pretty regularly because I like dessert. And so having just a new reason to have dessert, and it kind of goes into a thing that is sometimes not seen as fun. Like I think a lot of times as we think about stories from old people, we think of like this, like when I was your age, uphill both ways, in the snow, my brothers and sisters on my back. Like it's always like you listen to me because I'm older than you and wiser, and I've got to teach you something right now. And it doesn't have to be that way. There are some awesome, cool things that our family members have done that should be passed on and should be remembered.
Yeah, I love that. I am going to implement that.
Yeah, we can do
I
that.
love that. That's a great idea. And who doesn't love dessert? And I love that it was intentional. Like it might not have been complex or difficult. I mean, you still have to make the dessert, so there's something there. But I love that you make it a priority. You and your wife make it a priority, and that I think is key. Now, you said something before about your grandpa Jack, the one that started to have dementia, right? That was his name. I
Mhm.
loved what you said when you said he wrote down your names, and that was how he would not lose sense of self. And that really hit me really hard because it is in the preservation of our memories that we come to know who we are, that we preserve our identity or come to know what our identity is. And so I think what you said there was just really profound is how to not lose sense of self is to.
Yeah, well, it's how we feel like we belong.
Mhm.
Like I think right now in this time where all of us are in isolation, a lot of people are losing that feeling of connection and belonging because they're either one alone. Like I feel like my heart breaks for people that actually live by themselves. Like I work remote and I have meetings with people and I see that they're like in a 1 bedroom apartment. I'm like,
Right.
I could not do that. And even in your small family, you have some tribe there, but like we need to feel connected to things bigger than ourselves. It's just a basic human need. And so that's part of this need here is to say you have a legacy that goes back to just what happened in your 9 years of your life so far. There's people before you that have set you up for the blessings that you have today.
I love that need for connection. It's just part of drinking and breathing and food. We have to connect. I think there's been studies that if you leave a child and they're not held, they'll die. They need that nurturing. They need that connection, that human connection. So you talked about how to make stories fun. So you do desserts and then you tell fun stories. Do you have an example of maybe a story you might share that you do with your kids and how you make that entertaining?
So this is actually one of my favorite stories. I'm going to share this one. So my grandma Mary Lee, maybe I'll even bring this back a little bit further, is that when I was a kid, we would go to my grandma and grandpa Jack and Mary Lee. Those are my mom's parents, my maternal grandparents. I learned the words that to call them. And we would go there for Christmas Day, every year, Christmas Day. And without fail, me and my little sister would say, "Can we stay?" Because my cousins lived like a half mile away. So my parents would go home and we'd stay. But one of the things we always loved was we would just sit around grandma's feet in her chair and she would tell us stories. And my grandma had some super cool stories because she was a nurse, crazy things that happened to her. And so she told us a story about this woman that she had a towel in her room. This lady did. It's not going to get too graphic, don't worry. And so the head nurse was like, "Mary Lee, you have to go get that towel back." She's like, "Well, yeah, but she's, there's things in there. She had to have a towel to dry her hands off. She just had dinner." It's like, "No, Mary Lee, she can't have a towel in her room." And so she's like, "Okay." So she goes back there to get the towel. And the lady's like, "You can't have this towel. It's my towel." And my grandma doesn't know what to do. She's like, I don't know what to do. Goes back to the head nurse and she's like, "No, you need to go get that towel back." So Mary Lee comes back into the room. The lady had peed in a bowl and soaked the towel in the pee,
Oh
and
gosh.
then started swinging it overhead and saying, "Come and get it."
Oh no.
And so there's pee whipping all around the room. And my grandma's like, "You can keep it." And she slammed the door and she's like, "I'm not going in the back in there." And it was like one of those like things that anytime anyone says "come and get it," like that instantly comes to mind. And we all remember grandma and her just crazy times working as a nurse.
Oh man. That I don't know if I'll forget that story.
And the next time someone calls everyone for dinner and says "come and get it," you're like, "No, I don't think I want it anymore."
Grady, you just totally messed my whole brain. You know what? But that's the power of a story. Whether that was a yucky story or not, it's still the power of a story, right? And I don't think I'll ever forget that one. So
Yeah, and the
I don't know
thing
if I should say thank you or not.
well, and the fun thing too is like that's a great introduction for the kids. Like, that's crazy, but I know exactly who this is now. And then it puts us in better situations to share other stories that are helpful for the kids. Being able to bring it back and say, okay, now another thing about grandma is that she was in love with grandpa and they eloped. She was going to medical school and grandpa picked her up in the van. Grandpa actually drove across from Iowa actually no, reverse, from California to Iowa to go to grandma and get married to her. They got married. He dropped her off that night at like 2 a.m, 4 a.m, I think. She snuck back into her dorm in the college, nursing college, and he drove back to California because he was getting ready to enlist in the military. Like, that's the love story that my grandparents had. And so like the kids are able to hear those kinds of stories now because they've got some like I'm hooked in to whoever this lady was because of that fun story. Now we get to tell their love story and it makes much more sense to them. They're kind of like, okay, I'm interested. You can tell me whatever you want about grandma now. And so we can start teaching more stories that help them learn and to become more people of better character.
I love that. I love how you just like dropped a hook on them. You hook them with that crazy story, and then you could pull in the meaning. But what I love too, though, is life is full of all those crazy moments, and when they know they're that it's just part of life, then it's, I think, either easier to roll with the punches whenever they have a crazy situation like that. Hopefully not the exact same one. That would be sad. But, that life is just, I think that's a power of stories and storytelling in homes. And I think that we as parents can do a better job of making sure we're incorporating those into our everyday life. So that's great. I love that. So Grady, you said that you don't write anything down. That you like the
No.
oral story, right? You're an oral storyteller, but you are a social media storyteller, and so you do have those records there that if you pulled off, your kids would have, right? Or they, as they get older and use social media, and so I think that's important that people learn how to tell their stories in their own way. And so somebody like you that doesn't like to write down, and you're a podcaster, right? So you like
Yeah.
audio. So that's like a perfect fit for you, is as you're telling those stories, just recording that. And so I would love for you to just share some insight on how to individualize your storytelling based on what your interests are. Because a lot of people, I don't want them to come out of this summit saying, "Oh my gosh, now I need to go write a book about my life," or "Now I need to go create music," or this or that. The point of this summit is really just to get people excited and then see what is the best way for them personally, not because you said it or an author, anybody said it, but how do they find their voice, and how do they put that to memory or to recording and sharing?
Yeah, there's tons of tools out there that are really helpful. And there's lots of ways, like I said, like you said, that you can record your story. You could, if you're in the journaling, awesome, write that down if that's your jam. Like, that's a big thing too, is that do the thing that you already do probably naturally. Don't think you have to upend your life and do things totally differently. If you're not a natural storyteller, pump the brakes a little bit on it and say, okay, well, storytelling isn't my deal, but I can at least write down these stories now that I've got my mind going here and I've been thinking about them. And honestly, audio storytelling isn't super hard because really it's just talking out loud what's on your mind. As I think about some of these things that I usually do to get my stories down, one of the things I do is it's in my pocket. Hold on. I'll grab my phone. There's things that I don't want to forget.
Right.
And so I'll just bring up my phone and turn on, my face camera there. And I just tell a story to myself, really. And it's just saved in my phone and no one ever sees it. But it was a thing that I knew I didn't want to forget. And so I just record it really quickly. Sometimes I even remember to post it on social media. Sometimes I forget. there's all kinds of content that you guys will never see on my social media that I think was helpful, but I just never posted it. But at least I have it, and at least it's there. There's also some really cool tools if you ever have seen the website familysearch.org. Familysearch.org. It's available to anyone can create an account on there, and there's some really cool storytelling mechanisms. You can record, typing out stories. You can record pictures and audio recordings. You can go visit those family members that are still alive. Put your phone, do a voice memo, and just record. Have an interview with them. Ask questions, and then save it and upload it so that if you have other family members that are also in Family Search, they can see them too, and they can share them together. My great aunt Maureen has it's like a 40-page document about the story of my great grandmother.
Wow.
And like, it was just amazing. Just the cataloging that she had done. I would never do that. If you see 40 pages, you're like, no way, don't do that then. Find some other way that just aligns to your mechanism, the thing that you enjoy doing. For me, I like ice cream and storytelling. And so this is perfect for me.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a unique way to tell stories, is find what you love and try to incorporate that, because we want storytelling to be, it is a part of our everyday life. We're living our story. We're in the story. We're in our own movie, right?
I'm the main character.
Yeah, you're the main character. You're the hero. And so we're doing it naturally. Now, how can we step it up a little bit? How can we start recording? How can we start writing that down or recording it into an audio?
Well, I like what you brought up too about teaching with our stories too. My middle son, Grayson, has diabetes. He's got type 1 diabetes. My grandpa, George, so my paternal grandfather, my dad's grandfather, he had diabetes as well. He had type 2 diabetes, but very, very similar symptoms, very different causes, but similar symptoms. Right. And so there was a time where the hot water heater broke inside of the house, and hot water was going everywhere, all over the garage. And so he rushes out there, and he's, moving things out of the way. He's trying to block the water, trying to turn off the spigot. And he's out there running around. And finally, my grandma goes out there to step out there and goes, George, what are you doing? She steps in the water and she bounces back. It was all the near boiling water from the hot water heater was flooding up a couple inches. So it burned her. My grandpa George had no idea, because the diabetes had done such a bad job, or good job, maybe, like depends on how you look at it, at destroying his nerves. So his feet really had no feeling. So he was walking around in boiling water with no idea. And it wrecked his feet. He had a cane for most of his life after that. So when I talked to my son about how important it is to manage diabetes, not that I'm trying to scare him, but I wanted to make sure he understands just how serious it is when he's more cavalier with his carbohydrate counting, when he's like, click, 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 more insulin for no reason. He's just like, I just want to have more. I think I might eat later. Like, we're like, no, you got to do math for this stuff, because this is this kind of things that can happen. And because he knows who Grandpa George is from the stories we've told, from the pictures on our walls, he's like, oh, this isn't just like this could happen to you, or here's a stranger that I found on the internet. Like, this guy, you've never met him, but you know who he is. And this is what happened to him when he wasn't good at managing his diabetes.
I love that. I love how you were able to take a story from the past and apply it. And I think that's critical. And a lot of times we forget to make those connections. I think as we make those connections with our kids, they're able to connect to not just you, but to their grandfather and to their heritage, and can find a lot of hope, because for a young kid to have diabetes, that's a tough one. But knowing that, his grandfather and other people have gone through hard things, and, your grandfather kept walking, even with a cane. He didn't just sit down in a wheelchair. He kept pushing through. I think that's great.
Yeah, I think there's lots of things like we talked about earlier about that idea of feeling like a sense of community. Mm-hmm. I think it's this way with most conditions that that we have in our life, but diabetes is another one of those things where people that are diabetic really attach to each other, because they know that there are like issues with their life that they deal with that no one else understands. Like, right. I don't get it. Like, I've counted carbs before, but I've never given myself daily insulin injections. I've never had these problems. And, sometimes I tell them, like, dude, I know that it sucks. I don't know why it sucks or when it means to you, but I can tell you it's okay to say this is really hard. And at least I have somebody in my, in my deck of characters that I can at least align him to. Think about that. Your ancestors, I say ancestors. I don't mean like, people from like the 1400s. I just mean like your parents and your grandparents, and thinking about you or your kids and saying, what are some things that we have in common? What are some things that we both like? And how can I help myself feel more close to them? It could be just, their hobbies, their interests, the jobs they had. I think we think about family history as death dates and birth dates. And
Right.
that's like a small sliver of what family history is supposed to be. Family history is about connection with those who went before us. And I think that story is one of the best ways we can do that.
Right. I love that. I love how you said it's not just death dates and birth dates. And a quote I heard before is it's what is between the dash, between,
Yeah,
when the tombstone,
I
when
like
it
that.
says that dash is what is in between. And I love also how you're able to connect using pictures. You said like the pictures on the wall. So you can say, oh, and there's grandpa here.
Yeah, we have a bookshelf right by our kitchen table. We have bookshelves everywhere in our house. My wife is a big reader, which luckily means my kids are good readers.
Right.
And one of these bookshelves has all of the pictures of my grandparents and her grandparents. And so whenever we celebrate, we have one of the kids, we show them all the pictures on the bookshelf. We go, okay, go pick out Grandma Mary's picture. And they have to go find it. So they have to now keep jogging their memory of who this is. They bring it over and we show them the picture to the bookshelf so that they have, again, that visual representation of who this is. It's not just a faceless name, it's a real person. And the fun thing is, too, is that it's the picture of them when they're young. It's not the old picture of them towards the end of their life. It's when they were in their prime. Me having known them during my life, like in my brain, they're their old selves. It's just what it is. But for them, it's not that way. For them, they see them in their interesting thinking about their points of view as I consider these things.
And I love that children connect with children. They're going to connect with those in similar because that's their life. They don't understand the cane. I mean, they see the hard walking, but they don't understand a lot of those things because it's not their moment. And so I like how they're able to connect at their level. That's awesome, Grady. I love everything you shared. And I know our audience they want to know because I'm dying to know. I want to see that book, that calendar. I'd love to hear some more stories of the desserts and stuff. So, how can our audience connect with you and learn more?
Yeah. So if you stop by my blog, and my website is just gradykerr.com. So if you go there, you can get to know me a little bit better. Also, you can follow me on all the big socials. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, I think Pinterest. I got a page there too. And it's just Grady 8080. It's Grady 8080.
I just want to hit home what you said earlier again is that we have to tell stories. We have to preserve them in our families so we do not lose our sense of self. And so I really appreciate your wisdom and sharing some golden nuggets from your own family. So thank you so much.
Yeah. And it honestly, it's super easy to start. It isn't overwhelming. You've got, probably two parents, four grandparents. If you're married, your spouse has the same number. Maybe even have a blended family with even more branching out from there. Find out whose birthday is next. Just find that out. It's probably within the next month. You get that many people to choose from, and then just go find some stories and then make a plan to put something together. And find an easy dessert. If you can't find the dessert that they think is their favorite, or maybe they got a handful, pick the easiest one. Like my grandparents on my father's side, they both like chocolate chip ice cream. Boom, easy, done.
That's so good. I love that actionable step. I'm all about like inspire me, but now give me some.
Do it today.
Yes. Thank you so much, Grady. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you.